The sleek black SUV moved like a shadow down the serene suburban road, its engine purring softly as if reluctant to disturb the calm. Inside, Vanessa Carter, a poised and authoritative 40-year-old black woman, leaned back in her seat. Her dark, tailored jacket and no-nonsense demeanor hinted at her high-ranking profession, but tonight, she wasn't the FBI director steering national security. Tonight, she was just Vanessa, exhausted and longing for the peace of home, a quiet meal, and the solace of a good book. The suburban road stretched out like a ribbon of tranquility, with only a few cars dotting the landscape. Vanessa's SUV glided effortlessly, her headlights cutting through the dim light of dusk. The rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt was a soothing soundtrack to her thoughts, which had momentarily drifted away from the weight of her responsibilities. But tranquility shattered in an instant. In her rearview mirror, red and blue lights blazed to life, piercing the darkness with an urgency that made her heart skip. A wailing siren followed, its sharp cry pulling her out of her reverie. Confused, Vanessa glanced at the speedometer. She hadn't been speeding, hadn't missed any signs. Nothing about her driving could have warranted this. A frown crept onto her face as she slowed her vehicle and steered it to the side of the road. As her car came to a stop, Vanessa took a calming breath and rolled down the window. The approaching officer, a tall white man in his early 30s, walked with deliberate steps. His uniform was pristine, his badge catching the dim streetlight as he neared her car. His name tag read David Thompson, but his demeanor was far from professional. His cold, dismissive expression hinted at hostility, setting Vanessa's nerves on edge. Without so much as a greeting, the officer leaned down, his eyes darting over her and her car with barely concealed disdain. "You were stopped for security reasons," he announced, his tone curt and void of explanation. Vanessa straightened in her seat, her commanding presence now laced with a measured calm. "Security reasons?" she asked, her voice steady but inquisitive. "Is there a problem with me or my vehicle?" David ignored the question, his tone growing sharper. "Show me your vehicle registration and driver's license." Vanessa hesitated, the request ringing with the unnecessary force of someone testing boundaries. But years of experience had taught her how to navigate such situations. Slowly, she opened the glove compartment, retrieved the documents, and handed them over. David barely glanced at them before spinning on his heel and heading back to his patrol car. The silence that followed was anything but peaceful. Vanessa's thoughts swirled, heavy with a familiar sting. Despite her achievements, moments like these reminded her that for some, her skin color overshadowed her accomplishments. Even as the director of the FBI, she wasn't immune to these prejudices. David returned moments later, her documents dangling loosely in his hand. His expression was more hostile now, a smirk playing on his lips as he leaned into her window. "I need you to show me your ID," he demanded, his tone carrying an edge of threat. Vanessa's brow furrowed. "My car registration and driver's license are valid," she said firmly. "I've done nothing wrong. Why are you asking for my ID?" David's smirk widened, his arms crossing in a display of authority. "You've got a suspicious attitude," he said. "A car like this, someone like you, doesn't add up." Her pulse quickened, but her exterior remained calm. "Suspicious attitude? What exactly are you basing that on?" she asked, her voice unyielding. David shrugged, his gaze flicking dismissively over her elegant appearance. "Nothing special," he muttered, his tone dripping with condescension, "but I'm in charge here. If you don't hand over your ID, I have every right to take you to the station." Vanessa's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay composed. "Officer, your request is illegal. I've provided all the necessary documents required by law. Unless you have a valid reason, I won't present additional identification." David's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading into a sneer. "Don't tell me how to do my job, ma'am. People like you shouldn't challenge authority." For a moment, Vanessa froze, his words cutting deeper than she cared to admit. Slowly, she met his gaze. "I'm not challenging your authority," she said evenly. "I'm asking you to exercise it properly. What you're doing right now is an abuse of power, and it could get you into serious trouble." David leaned closer, his expression darkening. Trouble? You don't scare me. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? Vanessa's voice remained calm, her composure unshaken. Someone who knows the law better than you do. The tension thickened, the air between them charged with hostility. David took a step closer, his posture towering and aggressive. I'll tell you this one more time, he growled. Show me your ID, or I'll have no choice but to detain you. Vanessa held her ground, her voice steady. Officer Thompson, I've already provided all legally required documents. Your demand for my ID is not only unnecessary, it's unlawful. If you insist on continuing this, you'll be held accountable. David's expression twisted into anger, his bravado faltering but not yet broken. Accountable? He scoffed. You've got some nerve. You think you're above the rules, don't you? Vanessa's jaw tightened, but her voice remained firm. I don't think I'm above the rules, but I know the rules, and right now, you're breaking them. Her response seemed to push David further over the edge. His hand hovered near his holstered gun, a silent yet deliberate show of power. You're walking a thin line here, lady, he sneered. If you don't cooperate, I won't hesitate to use force. Vanessa's heart raced, but her face betrayed no fear. She glanced at his hand, the implicit threat clear, and took a steadying breath. Using force against someone who's done nothing wrong, she said slowly, only proves my point. You're abusing your authority. David slammed his hand on the roof of her car, his patience unraveling. Do you know who you're talking to? He barked. I'm the law here. You're just another stop driver. If you don't comply, I'll make sure you regret it. Vanessa met his anger with an unwavering gaze. You might want to rethink that, she said evenly. This isn't just about me. Your actions tonight could ruin your career. For a brief moment, a flicker of doubt crossed David's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. My career, he scoffed. You really think I care about what you have to say? His hand inched closer to his weapon. Vanessa remained motionless, her resolve hardening. She reached for her phone, holding it up deliberately where David could see it. What are you doing? David demanded, suspicion creeping into his voice. Vanessa pressed a number on speed dial and lifted the phone to her ear. Calling someone who outranks you, she said simply. Vanessa's voice was calm but authoritative as she spoke into the phone. This is Vanessa Carter, she began, her tone measured but firm. I'm being unlawfully detained by an officer. I need the sheriff's presence at my location immediately. The line connected, and Vanessa relayed her location with precision, ignoring the incredulous expression spreading across Officer David Thompson's face. His confidence seemed to falter as the realization dawned that she wasn't just any motorist. Who are you calling? David demanded, his voice tinged with a mix of suspicion and unease. Vanessa didn't answer him directly, instead speaking calmly into the phone. Thank you. I'll wait here. She ended the call and set her phone down, her eyes locking with David's. Her calm demeanor had a sharpness that cut through the tension like a blade. The sheriff will be here shortly, she stated, her voice steady and unwavering. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in David's eyes. His bravado cracked, but his hand remained near his holstered gun, as though holding on to the only shred of power he felt he had left. This isn't over, he muttered, his voice carrying far less confidence than before. Vanessa remained motionless in her seat, her calm gaze unwavering. Moments later, the unmistakable flashing lights of another vehicle pierced the darkness, growing brighter as the sheriff's SUV approached and came to a stop. Relief mingled with tension in the air as the situation took a decisive turn. Sheriff Alan Ramirez, a tall and authoritative Latino man with decades of law enforcement experience etched into his weathered face, stepped out of the SUV. His sharp eyes assessed the scene with practiced efficiency as he approached David. Thompson, Ramirez called out, his voice firm and edged with disbelief. What's going on here? David straightened his posture, trying to mask the unease creeping over him. Sir, he began, his voice uneven. This woman refused to cooperate. She wouldn't show me her ID, and she's being, lower your tone and step back, Ramirez interrupted sharply, his commanding tone cutting through David's explanation. He noticed the tension in Vanessa's posture, and the weight of the moment settled heavily on his shoulders. Ramirez's sharp eyes narrowed as he took in the situation. "Are you pointing a gun at an unarmed civilian?" he demanded, his voice rising with anger. David hesitated, his hand lingering near his holster. Slowly, he stepped back, his posture stiff with defiance. "I was just doing my job," he muttered defensively, avoiding the sheriff's piercing gaze. The sheriff's expression hardened. "Your job doesn't include intimidating citizens or abusing your authority," he said coldly. "Now step aside." David grudgingly moved away from Vanessa's car, his face pale and tight with anger and embarrassment. Ramirez turned his attention to Vanessa, his demeanor softening. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but apologetic, "are you all right?" Vanessa nodded, her tone measured as she replied, "I'm fine, Sheriff, but this officer's actions were not only inappropriate, they were unlawful." Something shifted in Ramirez's expression as he studied her face. Recognition dawned, his eyes widening slightly. "Director Carter?" he asked quietly, disbelief coloring his tone. David froze in place, the color draining from his face as the weight of Ramirez's words hit him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out as he struggled to process the revelation. "Yes," Vanessa confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "Vanessa Carter, director of the FBI." Silence blanketed the scene as the gravity of the situation became clear. David stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Director, I didn't know. You didn't know who I was?" Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp but controlled. "It doesn't matter who I am. Your behavior tonight is a clear example of systemic abuse, and it has to stop." Ramirez's jaw tightened, his expression hardening as he turned back to David. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he demanded, his tone filled with anger. "You stopped and harassed the director of the FBI without cause, pointed a weapon at her, and violated her rights. This is beyond unacceptable. It's a disgrace." David stammered, his voice trembling. "Sir, I didn't know. I was just—" "You were just abusing your authority," Vanessa cut in, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Your actions tonight weren't just inappropriate, they were dangerous." Ramirez nodded in agreement, his gaze piercing as he addressed David. "Thompson, return to the station immediately. Write a full report about what happened here. I'll deal with you later." David hesitated, glancing between Ramirez and Vanessa as though searching for a way out. "But sir—" "No buts," Ramirez snapped, his tone brooking no argument. "Go. Now." David finally relented, his steps stiff and reluctant as he retreated to his patrol car. The sound of the engine starting and his car pulling away marked his departure, but the weight of the incident lingered in the air. Ramirez turned back to Vanessa, his expression heavy with regret. "Director Carter," he began, his tone respectful, "I can't express how sorry I am for what happened tonight. This officer's behavior does not represent our department, and I will personally ensure he's held accountable." Vanessa's gaze remained steady, her voice firm as she replied, "Thank you, Sheriff Ramirez. But this isn't just about me. It's about ensuring no one else has to endure what I just did." Ramirez nodded solemnly, a flicker of shame crossing his face. "You have my word," he said. "We'll conduct a full investigation and take appropriate action. I'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." Vanessa studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I trust you'll do the right thing," she said, her tone resolute. As Ramirez assured her once more of his intentions, Vanessa knew the night's events were far from over. While she had stood her ground tonight, this was just one battle in a much larger fight. The road ahead was long, but she was no stranger to breaking barriers and confronting injustice. With a determined resolve, Vanessa started her car and drove away, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.